I'm Jess West, leadership and burnout coach for high achieving women. I help you redefine success without sacrificing your well-being. This is Successful AF, the podcast for people who've climbed all the ladders, ticked all the boxes, and still feel like success is a million miles away. Today, I'm joined by someone very special, my friend Abi Schoenheimer, who I met nearly 15 years ago in Santiago, Chile. Abi's story is one of constant movement and reinvention. Born in Sydney, she spent her life ping-ponging between Australia and Europe, Amsterdam, London, and South Africa, which I know is not in Europe. From Big Four consulting to investment banking, through COVID lockdowns, working South African hours as a night creature in Sydney, those are her words, to navigating motherhood whilst completing a master's degree. Abi's career has been anything but linear. What makes Abi's journey so compelling is her honesty about the disconnect between knowing and feeling. She knows she's successful but struggles to feel it. She owns her failures but can't quite claim her wins. And she's wrestling with two competing definitions of success. The one she was programmed with, climb the ladder, get the title, post on LinkedIn, and the one she's chosen for herself, being in the driver's seat of life's trade-offs. Through it all, Abi's learned that she is much less bothered about what she's doing and more concerned about who she's doing it with. And right now, her success metric isn't a corner office, it's getting home for bath time with her almost 2-year-old daughter, Lucienne. Let's get into today's episode. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
I am very excited to have you here. This morning, I was trying to work out how long we've known each other for, and I think you will be the person I've known longest because we met in 2010, right? So we're coming up to 15 years of friendship here.
Whoa, that is wild.
Yeah.
We met in Santiago in Chile.
We did. Yeah. It's weird because I don't think we've ever actually lived in the same place, despite having been friends. I lived in Santiago when you lived in Amsterdam. Then you moved back to Sydney. I moved back to Birmingham. Then I think you were in London when I was in Hong Kong. And then you moved, I think we then tag teamed when I came back to London and you went back to Sydney.
Yeah, that feels just about right. It feels weird because I've only been to Santiago once, but it was with you and it was 15 years ago.
Tell us your story.
I was born in Sydney, which is important because I have spent, as discussed, a lot of my life pinging back and forth between Sydney and Europe and you've been here and you, I think, spent a particularly glorious summer here when we were in our sort of mid-20s. You know, this is objectively a great place to be. It's easy to live here. It's good to make money here. Life is good. Weather is good. And on top of all that, it's where my friends and family are. But it is a place that is at the arse end of nowhere. It's on the wrong side of the world from where I always felt the action was happening. And so I've always had a bit of a love-hate relationship with it for that reason. And so as soon as I finished school, I chose a uni degree where I could spend a year abroad. And I always wanted to study in Amsterdam, which I did. And then while I was in Amsterdam, I decided I was going to move to London when I finished uni, which I did. Which is I look back on it now and realize how privileged I was that I just decided I will, of course, move to London and I'll figure it out and I'll find a job, which somehow I did. And I started with one of the Big Four consulting firms in London because that's what you did when you didn't know what to do. In my family was you became a management consultant. And everything just really snowballed from there. I lived in London for a couple of years, came back to Sydney, moved over from consulting to working in one of the investment banks in Australia, then decided I did want to be in London after all, moved back to London, decided I didn't want to be in London, came back to Australia via South Africa. That's where I was when COVID hit. So I came back and then it was COVID times. And then it was a lot of introspection and a lot of what am I going to do with myself? I think at that point, that's when I started my master's. And then I sort of had these quite grandiose notions at that point that I could do a fun job when I finished my master's, and that I had left the corporate world behind and I was no longer going to be a slave to the Lenovo, and I was going to be a MacBook girl from here on in. But it didn't quite happen like that. And I ended back in investment banking and then back in consulting to large corporates. And I was doing all of that part-time because at that point I had decided to have a kid, and having a flexible job while I was pregnant and then had a kid was very useful. And then maybe 6 months ago, I transitioned back into a full-time corporate role. And now I have a corporate job, an almost 2-year-old, and a master's degree that gave me a brief amount of hope that life could be more. It's quite a sad story when I tell it like that.
No, right. We've got so much to dig into. Firstly, like, curious about the travel, right? So you are someone who has, I would say, travel in your bones. You are an adventurer, you are an explorer. What do you get from living abroad? Because you travel as well, right? But you choose to live. Like, you've lived in what, 3-4 different on 3-4 different continents? Like, that's fairly unusual.
Yeah, it's a weird one, but I think that I like to be the outsider. I think that's where I've landed with trying to figure out what it is about why I enjoy being abroad and living abroad, is because that is a position I think I relish, is feeling like I'm looking at something from the outside in. I think maybe it's also just because I want to be, I'm so basic. Everything about me is very basic. And so it's just the only way I think I can think to get edge, that I can be even like slightly edgy, is to just at least be not from here. At least that's like a very basic way of differentiating myself. And I genuinely think that's why I struggle being back in Sydney so much, is I feel I am straight down the line, straight in the middle of the average. And I don't think I like that feeling.
Say more.
I don't like to fit in.
Interesting. But what does fitting in mean?
I'm sure there's an argument that nobody fits in and that nobody is truly normal or average or whatever it is, and we're all special in our own little ways. And I do believe that. But I think if I look at everything that I've done in my life, moving around geographically, but also moving around professionally, there was always something in me that just did better when I was on the outer edge of something. And so whether that was being at the outskirts of a corporate, pushing the boundaries of what is a staid professional attitude to corporate work, or on the other end of things, when I did go out into the world of more boutique consulting, was I then reverted to being the corporate person there that was there to remind those folks, you don't understand what it's like in these corporates and what they're up against. So wherever I was, I played the part of that person just sort of skulking around the boundary.
What I hear from that is that you take, like, whether it's pleasure or enjoyment or whatever, like, your role is as the agitator. And I think that is true both in a professional and a personal sense. You'll challenge me to see the world differently. You'll encourage me to do different things. And I think we technically weren't, like, we met through another friend. It wasn't like we were destined to be friends. Like, we only really met for a week. And then I just think we had these mad conversations, and then that just sort of kind of snowballed. And so I don't necessarily see it as skulking. I think you just really enjoy bringing a different perspective. But like, as much as you say you're down the line, you do bring difference. But I'm interested to know how you feel about being described as a change maker.
A change maker.
Yeah, that's what we're going with.
I don't know how we got from boundary skulker to change maker. That's certainly a more flattering
It's all
description.
perspective.
I think that on the one hand, I think it's a valid characterization. Sometimes, if I'm honest, I don't know if I do make change or if I'm just provoking other people to make change. I think that's one of the things that I really struggle with, is that I think, quite good at poking at things for other people, but I think that I've done a pretty poor job of taking my own medicine. I think I'm always good for a thought-provoking challenge, but I don't know if I do make change myself.
I mean, you've lived across the world.
But I think it's funny, isn't it? And this is something that everybody struggles with, but I think, like everybody, the things that I find easy, I don't tend to value them. And the things that I find really hard, I think, are the important things in life. So for me, it's very easy to just pick up and move across the world. It seems to me sometimes the harder thing is to stay and figure things out and tough it out. And so a lot of people think that I have resilience because I move around a lot, and they think that must take some kind of resilience. But I think it's the opposite. I think it takes resilience to hang around.
Interesting. I think they're both correct, right? I think it's an interesting perspective shift. You kind of vaguely gave us the outline of corporate banking, consultancy banking, blah, 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 blah. Tell me what the thread was as you were going through. Was it just like, oh, this seems like an interesting role, I'm going to do it? Or was there like an intention behind the approach?
I thought you were going to ask what was the thread between the jobs, and I was going to say PowerPoint. But was there intention? That's a very good question. The answer is no. I was talking about this to a friend recently, because she's very strategic about how she thinks about her career and taking advantage of this project or this training. And she's talking about launching a business in 5 or 6 years, and is already thinking about what are the things that she can do within the current context of her job to get her there. And my brain was just melting at the thought of such strategic thinking, because I tend to be very reactive. A lot of the moves were about moving myself physically and then just figuring out what I could do to be there. And then I think what I've learned is that I'm much less bothered about what I'm doing and much more bothered about who I'm doing it with.
Yeah. Firstly, like, I wish I was more like your friend with the strategic mindset. Like, Jesus, literally, I woke up this morning and was like, oh, I'm going to start a women's group. Okay, cool. I'll do it today then. And then someone messaged me and was like, I literally spoke to you yesterday. Like, why didn't you mention this? I was like, oh, because I just decided to do it this morning. Like, my brain does not think in long term, but I am jealous of people who do.
But you also have an execution focus, which is good, because at least you're doing something, even if it's short
Yeah, but it's all throwing
term.
stuff against the wall. I'm like, let's see if this works.
I think those are two very different but very valid ways of being successful, is throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks, or just thinking really, really carefully about what you're about to peg at the wall and knowing that it will stick. I
Mm.
think I might land somewhere in between.
I do think it's very valid though. And it's definitely, as I like get older, who I'm working with rather than necessarily what I'm doing has become so much more important.
I think there's a part of it which is in certainly in my line of work, and I joked about PowerPoint before, but that is what I'm doing. I'm aligning boxes on slides for various projects. Some of them I do think have meaning and impact, but you have to really squint to see it, and you have to really want to believe it, and you can take a very cynical view of it, which is all to say what you do in my line of work it's not inconsequential, but it's very easy for it to take a backseat to the experience that you have while you're doing it. Maybe 2 years ago, a study I read said that your well-being is just as affected by your direct manager as by your therapist. So like the quality of the relationship that you have with your manager can be more detrimental or have more of a positive impact on your well-being than having a really good psychologist. And it's about on par with the quality of the relationship that you have with your spouse or partner. So I think it's crazy we should be looking for bosses, not looking for jobs.
That's huge.
Yeah, it is. And the other research, which I know is like kicking about LinkedIn all the time, is the majority of people leave bosses, not jobs. So it's kind of like, if you know you're going to leave them, if you know they're the reason that's going to drive you out, then that should be your number one criteria on the way in as well. And I think we all know that. And that is why probably the most meaningful work I have done is with frontline leaders, because I think you can have a big impact there, and trying to get across to someone who works, I've done work for the NHS, for example, somebody who manages a team of nurses on the ward. You can have a huge impact there, just getting them to think about self-awareness and this idea that, how when your boss is a good boss, you're in a good way. And when your boss is not a good boss, you're not. You're actually having that impact on the person below you. And watching their sort of heads explode as they have that revelation, I think that is probably some of the most powerful stuff that I've done now that I think of it. But it's really easy to get wrapped up in, but I also, I facilitate executive level sessions and I'm doing all this strategic stuff at the top of the organization. And I do get a kick out of it. I get an intellectual boost out of it. I get an ego boost out of it. But it's really hard to move those people because they've seen and heard it all before.
I think there's a few things, but I want to just follow that thread for a second. I've been like in a similar place recently, just thinking like the world is burning, literally. What am I doing? Is what I do important? And then I think that can lead down a very dark place quite quickly if you're not careful, because you're just suddenly like, what's the point of it all? And I guess the conclusion I always come to, and maybe this is just like self-mollification, but it's the idea that I really only have the power to make my corner of the world a better place. And in doing that, would hope that there's been a knock-on effect at some point. It's the butterfly effect, isn't it? But I do take your point about, particularly when working with senior executives who are just like, we've done the training, we've heard this before. But is there something in just changing one single person's mindset that can bring joy?
Yeah, definitely. And I think we spend a lot of time talking about needing a purpose. And I think that's fine, and to a degree very helpful, helping people to connect with something that's bigger than just what their actual day-to-day job is. But I think that this whole like search for purpose has also taken on a meaning of its own, and people are really looking for these grandiose narratives for themselves and looking to really find identity in their place in the world by what they do at work. But actually, I think to your point, so much of the impact that we can have is just in the micro moments with the people that we do touch. And I think that's a much more fertile hunting ground for purpose than needing something unitary.
Yeah. It was something that I thought of when you were talking about leadership. I don't think we're taught these things. I think we are like pre-programmed through society to assume that you will climb the ladder and you will just become, because that is the natural progression and that's the natural order of things. And then on the other side of that is people are good at what they do and then they become more and more senior. And as they become more and more senior, they then are expected to lead people. But just because someone is an excellent surgeon, they might not be a great leader of people. And I think there's almost this like interesting situation where do we decouple like skill and leadership, because they technically are two different things. And I know leadership is a skill, but do you know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. And in highly technical industries, you see it at its most chronic. The NHS is a great example of it. I think in the corporate world, people have gotten slightly better, obviously in the very narrow skills of, I don't know, if you're a developer or if you're an actuary or something like that, you still see it in those teams. But I think there's also a question about what good leadership is in today's age, because I think what used to be acceptable is no longer acceptable. So, yeah.
I really want to ask you what good leadership looks like in the age of AI, but I feel like that's not really the point of this podcast and we will be here for ages. So I won't, but I'm just going to throw it out there to anyone who wants to answer that question. Let us know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a brain melter.
What does success mean to you? Tell me about that face. What does
I
that
know the
face mean?
recoil. Do you know what? I think I have two definitions of success. The one that I was programmed with that, quite frankly, I don't think I have completely let go of, which would be very familiar to a lot of people. Climb the ladder, get the job title, post the stuff on LinkedIn about the job title and climbing the ladder and all of that sort of thing. I think I have tried very hard to let go of that, and most importantly, to not let it guide my decisions. But it does feel like an albatross around my neck a lot of the time as I try and make my way in the world in alignment to what I actually have chosen to think of success as, rather than been conditioned to think of success as. So I will just preface that with, I don't think that I've completely rid myself of all of the inbuilt 90s capitalist guilt of that we all grew up in. But I think my notion of success, and it's not really terribly romantic, although I do think there's space for romanticism within this framework, but it's premised on the fact that nothing is perfect. No city is perfect. No job is perfect. No life partner is perfect. And so life is a series of trade-offs that you have to make. And you're just balancing different priorities. And I think success is just being in the driver's seat of those decisions and you're making the trade-offs. They're not being made for you. And so what is important to you at any given life stage is reflected in how you've set up your life and set up your career and things like that. So I suppose within that framework, if a sense of romance or if it feels like very important to you to have a deep sense of purpose, then success is following that model. For me, when I was pregnant and when I was on mat leave, not that I was very good at taking mat leave, I feel like I was successful because I had set up my life in a way that allowed me to work as much as I wanted, when I wanted, and no more and no less. Yeah.
How did you manage that?
By following the people that understood what that phase of life is like, and by trading some stuff off.
Yeah,
There was a
okay.
lot I didn't get in those years. I generally really like being part of a team, having an office to go to, that sort of sense of belonging, even if I am going to skulk around the boundary. But I didn't have that for a couple of years because that felt, as much as it is important to me, it was less important than I knew, for example, that if I was in a corporate role, then mat leave was going to be a case of basically don't come back until you're ready to come back at least 4 days a week. And
Yeah, okay.
I knew that I was going to want to come back a lot earlier, but not 4 days a week. And so for me, that's where I put my focus. And it was, just by surrounding myself with the people that would get that and allow me to do that.
Yeah. So like a lot of intentionality.
Yeah, probably for once in my life, I was quite deliberate.
You talked about like the original definition of success and like where you're at now and probably being middling between those. Was there a significant event or a realization that sort of changed that for you? Or was it just as you get older, you're like, God, different stuff matters now?
I think so. I think it's a series of micro events, probably. I worked with a very senior executive once, a female senior executive, and she was going around to the different offices all over the world to meet the people that she led. She had, I think, 10,000 people in her downline or something. And I, I assume because she was a woman, she got a lot of questions about how do you do it? How do you balance it? How do you have it all? And her answer was, I have a stay-at-home husband. And it was pretty grim as an answer. Very much respect the honesty, but I think it was just a series of those kinds of things and looking at the very senior women in a lot of the organizations I was in and thinking, I don't want your life,
Mm.
actually. Yeah.
What was it in particular that you didn't want about it? Or was it just a culmination, that's the word, of who they were or what they did?
I just think, funnily enough, it didn't look like they were having much fun. And I'm quite a hedonist.
She's
Hedonist?
here for the fun.
I am a good time gal. And I think a part of it was just looking at that and thinking to myself, that doesn't really inspire, it doesn't spark joy. And I know that I think I've since, and like having a kid now and that sort of thing, I think, it's not fun, quite frankly. This time of life is really not a particularly fun one. So I'm not judging them at all. And I think it's rotten and unfair that a lot of the men that I worked with were having a really great time. A really great time. And I don't know where their partners were in all of this. I like to think their partners were off somewhere having a great time as well, but odds are they probably weren't. So, I think I slowly realized that I didn't want to be on that side of the equation.
I think obviously we can't speak for anyone else, right? But I think there is like a general conception of work really hard now and then you can have fun later. But I no, we don't know that we get later.
I think this goes back to the whole thinking strategically about life.
Yeah.
I'm not very good at deferred, what is it? Like deferred satisfaction or whatever it is.
Delayed gratification. Yeah.
Yeah, that
But
one.
same. Yeah.
Yeah, that one makes more sense. And I think for me, one of the things I'm actually really glad about, and my friends and I talk about it a lot, is while we are in the trenches in this time of life, which, as discussed, is not the most frolicking fun, is I'm glad that I left it all out on the field in my sort of late 20s, early 30s. I
Like
gave it a
all the
nudge.
fun. Yeah.
I think I would be quite resentful. And I'm optimistic that the fun will come back, but I think have the fun now. And then have a
Yeah.
break from the fun and then go back to the fun. That's, I think, the broad, I think that's the broad pattern I'm hoping that life is going to take, that I'm just like in that, like it's a little bit squeezed. I hope it's like an infinity sign and I'm just like, I have to get from one side to the other.
Yeah. I like that. Great. Good.
Yeah.
Keep me posted.
It's like an infinity fun loop, but you do have to pass through the like narrow neck
Yeah.
to get to the other side.
Yeah. That's probably fair though. If you look at life, like there tends to be like less fun points. So let's all hope
Yeah,
that the fun.
I'm definitely optimistic. I see a light at the end of
Great.
the tunnel already.
Great. This is good news. There
Yeah,
we go. It's going to be okay. The
it is.
fun will return.
The fun will
Um,
return.
what challenges have you had to overcome?
Just the run of the mill self-imposed ones.
Okay, yeah, say more about those. Just those standard ones.
I think, I don't even want to say it because it sounds so self-indulgent mixed with self-flagellation. It's awful, but I think one of the things that I struggled with, and probably as you've heard over the last, I don't know, if we've been recording for 30 something minutes now, I find it really difficult to own my success.
Mm.
I tend to put my success down to my environment, the luck I've had being born into the place and time and family and city and whatever else. So I really only own my failures. And I feel undeserving of success, really.
I mean, that's not a unique position. Like the
God, no.
number of people, women, who I invite to be on this podcast, and they're like, but I'm not really successful.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, okay. And I'll objectively, they are, yourself included. And I'm curious, and I'm the same. Like, I find it very hard to be like, I'm successful. What does success mean? Blah, blah. We could go down the whole rabbit hole. But I guess, is it fair that you own your failures and not your successes?
Oh, I don't know whether it's fair. It's probably deeply unproductive.
Yeah, but like, you're not playing, like, you're quite a logical person,
Oh, yeah.
right? But then if you own the failures, surely the success is on the other side of the failures.
Yes. Logically, that is sound.
Hmm.
I think that therein lies the challenge that I'm constantly working to overcome. And I think even to your point, when you asked me to be on this podcast, I think I had the exact same reaction as probably a lot of people did. But I think sometimes you've just got to step outside of yourself and treat yourself the way that you would treat a friend, which is how I've chosen to think about it, which is that if a friend told me, an old friend has asked me to do this thing, but I feel, yeah, I would tell them to wind their neck in and get on with it. So sometimes you've just got to look at it in that way.
Well, I appreciate you winding your neck in and getting on with it because otherwise I wouldn't be here. Yeah, I think it's a complicated relationship with success. And I do think redefining it for oneself helps that acceptance, because you can say, no, I have achieved the parameters that I set for myself, for example. But I guess to your earlier point, is it all okay if you're having fun? Do you know what I mean? Does it
Oh,
matter if you're successful or not? If fun is the ultimate like measurement, then
yeah.
maybe that works.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it's really hard to take the micro and macro view at the same time because I really like having fun in the micro, but in the macro, I do want to be successful as well. But I'm not very good. Again, it's the whole delayed gratification. Is that where we landed as the
Mm,
phrase?
yeah.
But what drew you to the concept of success as where you wanted to focus this whole endeavor?
Oh, she's turning the microphone around. Good question. I think because for me, it's such a weird thing. And I think chasing success, whatever that means, has led me into burnout more than once.
Like,
And I wanted to lift the lid a little bit on what it actually means for people and just invite everyone to create their own version,
yeah,
because I truly believe that there is not a one size fits all. And I think we are starting to see a world that does embrace a lot more diverse opinion, background, people, bodies, shapes, sizes, all of this stuff. And I think why not also have a diverse definition of success? Because I just think it's unfair that we're all subscribing to the same thing, because it's just impossible that we're all going to be the CEO in the corner office. That's not going to happen. And so
yeah. There's so
opening that
much
door.
there's so much to
Yeah, sorry.
unlearn.
Yeah.
And I was talking to somebody about it recently, and it feels exactly like all the stuff we now have to unlearn about body image that we learned in the 90s. And it's
Mm.
so hard to let go of that stuff. And having a little girl, and honestly, it means I have several thoughts a day that I cannot express out loud because I know they will be so detrimental to her self-esteem. And, comments I would make about myself. And so having to really, really consciously unlearn that. But there's such a parallel there, right? Because in the same way that
Mm.
not everybody's going to be the CEO in the corner office, obviously not everybody's built to be a supermodel or have that one very narrow definition of beauty either. But just like I can say that and on one level really believe it, it doesn't mean that when I look in the mirror, I don't have a gut reaction that is the culmination of years of conditioning.
And does the questioning the belief for Lucienne change, who by the way is Abby's daughter, because otherwise that makes no sense if I've just thrown in a random name.
She's a celebrity.
Yeah, she does it help you actually unlearn stuff, or are you just like, oh, I just won't say that because I don't want to pass that on?
I think that's the thing, isn't it? Is what I'm trying to kind of live by is, that thing that does the rounds on social media that's like your first thought is conditioning and your second thought is choice.
I've never heard this, but
It's
great.
I
Thank
don't
you for
I
bringing
don't
it to
know
my
if
attention.
I'm articulating it properly, but it's sort of don't give yourself too much of a hard time for the first thought that you have. If it's unkind to yourself or to others, it's probably the result of programming. But if you can continue to have that second thought, that's the choice that you're making. And I suppose I don't know if that second thought will ever truly become my first thought, but it still feels like a worthy thing to do to continue to have the second one. And I'm much gladder to have it as a second thought than not have it at all.
Hmm. I really like that. Thanks.
You're
There
so
we go.
welcome.
I'm very interested in this one. What advice would you give your younger self?
I've been thinking about this one and I just haven't got a very good answer, partly because I know that I wouldn't have taken it, and partly because I think it's all just the same shit we all learn as we get older.
Say it anyway.
Well, actually, one that has been on my mind a lot lately is about not being in such a hurry to get to the next thing.
Mm.
Because I'm a very nostalgic person and I get very swept up in wistful thinking about the good old days. When I landed at Heathrow last year, which was the first time I'd been in the UK since before COVID, I was in a rental car driving out to the Cotswolds. And at the time, I was literally on the M25 and I was just weeping because I was seeing all these signs for like grim commuter towns that I just hadn't seen in a really long time. But the nostalgia was literally like coming at me in waves. And it's just such a symptom of how I live my life. Like, no, I don't need to cry over seeing the signs for Slough or whatever it is. That's very weird. But I think what I'm trying to learn, and it's particularly now that I have a kid, and so you go through all these phases and it's really easy to be like, I hate this phase, I want the next phase to come. But there is like a beauty in all of the phases. And so just like not to wish it away and not to try and speed through it. And again, to try to live your life like you're looking back on it. I think, yeah.
I like that. Oh, it's almost like advice to your future self as well, that one.
Yeah, exactly. It's really, it's transcending the time-space continuum, that bit of advice.
Yeah. What permission do you want to give others through your story?
Wow. I think the permission of knowing things, but not necessarily being able to feel them.
Say
I
more.
think, so much of life is knowing something to be true. For example, knowing that objectively I am successful, but not feeling successful. Or when you go through a breakup, knowing you'll be okay, but not feeling like you're going to be okay. And I know for a lot of people, that frustration and that like weird blame spiral and guilt just makes any given struggle you have worse. And so if there was somebody listening who was saying like, I know what you're saying is true, but it is deeply unhelpful to me in this moment, I would give that person permission to say, I don't need this in my life right now.
Yeah. I like that though, because I actually hadn't ever thought about it like that. And I wonder if there's like something in just like following the knowing, even if you don't feel it. It's like the opposite of fake it till you make it.
I think that that's right. But I don't think I should be in a position to be giving anyone permission to do anything.
Okay, well, we've just opened a whole other can of worms there. But I asked you to answer the question.
I know,
I
and
gave you
it's
permission.
this is what the skulker does. It's like, I don't like the question. I think every question you've asked, I've maybe like cringed or rolled my eyes or done something, which is not a reflection of you as much as my inability to answer a very, not simple question. They're not simple, but they are quite straightforward.
Interesting. Well, in that case, let's see how you get on with the quick fire.
Oh dear.
Are you ready?
Sure.
One word to describe your current relationship with success.
Fractious.
Your non-negotiable boundary that protects you from burnout.
Fun.
Complete this. You're going to hate this. You have permission to.
Oh. Get on the plane.
Yes. What does rest look like for you?
Getting on the plane.
One thing you wish more people knew about building a sustainable career.
I think it's the boss thing, thinking carefully about the boss.
Yeah, huge. The success metric that matters to you most right now?
Right now, it's so naff, but it's just getting home for bath time.
That's not naff.
It's quite naff.
Stop it. It's cute. I feel like you've grown up so much. I feel so proud. And finally, what makes you feel most successful as fuck?
I think it's that I am happy with my choices.
Yes. I'm so happy. I'm so happy. Thanks. I had a lovely time. And even though I could tell you were deeply unhappy with all of my questions, you did a great job of answering them all. Thanks. There's an awful lot in there. So thank you.
Look, it's an awful lot for me on a Friday night.
Yeah, to be fair, it is your nighttime. You've done
so I think I
bed.
might go and have a scotch, contemplate my life, notions of success. And yeah, I mean, that's enough to be getting on with really for a Friday night, isn't it?
That'll do, I think.
That'll do.
Yeah. Thank you so much for listening today. And a huge thanks to Abi for her honesty and for winding her neck in to do this podcast despite her reservations. Abi's story really struck me, particularly her observation that we spend so much time looking for these grandiose narratives and trying to find identity through work, when actually the most meaningful impact we can have is in the micro moments with the people we touch. That's such a powerful reframe. I loved her definition of success of being in the driver's seat of life's trade-offs, making sure what's important to you at any given stage is reflected in how you've set up your life. And her reminder that your well-being is just as affected by your direct manager as your therapist. That research is staggering and exactly why we should be looking for bosses, not just jobs. The biggest takeaway for me? Abi's concept of the infinity fun loop. Have the fun now, take a break from the fun when life demands it, then return to the fun. She's optimistic the fun will come back, and I think that's a beautiful way to think about life seasons. Also, her reminder about the first thought being conditioning and the second thought being choice. That's wisdom I'm taking with me. Now, if you're a high-achieving woman who's tired of burning out to prove yourself, I can help. I work with clients one-on-one and run workshops on sustainable success and leadership. You can find me at www.kalicoaching.co.uk or on Instagram at kalicoaching.co. Ready to redefine what success means for you? Let's talk. And if this week's episode of Successful AF has resonated with you, I do want to hear about it. Drop me a line at successfulafpod@gmail.com. I'm always looking for inspirational people to join me on the pod, so if you know someone you think would be great, nominate them or yourself at successfulafpod@gmail.com. And as always, please do like and subscribe. It really does help, and I appreciate you being here. See you next time.